Sting! Small, sharp, and shaped like it came from a high-end elf gift shop, Sting is a dagger that acts like a sword because hobbits are tiny. Forged in Gondolin, yes, that Gondolin, the hidden elven city that got absolutely wrecked, Sting was designed to slay orcs. Which it does. Gloriously, it glows blue when orcs are nearby, which is either super helpful or anxiety-inducing depending on the time of day. First owned by Bilbo Baggins, who names it after stabbing a giant spider in the face, it's later passed down to Frodo because that's how family heirlooms work in the Shire. This little sword sees more action than half the Fellowship combined, and even gets a few good lines in the movies. Iconic. Then there's Glamdring, which sounds like a spell from Harry Potter, but is actually Gandalf's sword. Also from Gondolin, Glamdring was once wielded by King Turgon, who, fun fact, died during the fall of his own city. The sword was lost for a few thousand years until a bunch of trolls decided to store it with some other legendary weapons, as trolls apparently moonlight as antique collectors. Glamdring doesn't glow in the books, but absolutely does in the films because glowing swords sell merchandise. Gandalf uses it like a wizard uses a staff with flair and occasional stabbing. Its name literally means foe-hammer, which is also what it does to goblins on the regular. Next up, Orcrist, the sibling sword to Glamdring, also known as the Goblin-cleaver, which I imagine is not what goblins call it fondly. Orcrist belonged to Thorin Oakenshield and gets a dramatic character arc, including being buried with its owner and then glowing eerily on his corpse to warn of approaching orcs. Which is beautiful and also horrifying like a Tolkien version of a security system. It's from Gondolin too, because apparently Gondolin was just churning out deathblades like a fantasy Costco. And speaking of deathblades, we can't ignore the diva of the sword world, Andúril. Originally forged as Narsil, which shattered during the War of the Last Alliance when its owner Elendil was unceremoniously body-slammed by Sauron. His son Isildur picked up the broken blade and used it to slice the One Ring off Sauron's hand, which, if we're being honest, was the high point of Isildur's life before he got ambushed by orcs and dropped the ring in a river like an idiot. Narsil lay broken for over 3,000 years until it was reforged into Andúril, Flame of the West, Aragorn's sword, the symbol of kingship. This thing doesn't just glow, it sings. Like literally, it has runes that glow with light and hum when unsheathed. No pressure. Let's tone it down a bit with Barrow-blades. These are the swords that the four hobbits pick up after surviving a Barrow-wight encounter, which, in case you forgot, is basically a medieval haunted house with knives. These blades were forged by men of Westernesse, aka Númenóreans, specifically to kill creatures like the Witch King, which pays off since Merry stabs him in the knee with one. Yes, a cursed undead overlord was defeated by a hobbit shiv to the leg. Legendary. Moving on to swords with even more edge, Anglachel. This one's metal, literally and emotionally. Forged by Eel, a dark elf who makes swords out of meteors and bitterness. Anglachel is gifted to King Thingol, who later gives it to a guy named Beleg. Spoiler, it doesn't go well. Beleg gets accidentally murdered by Túrin Turambar with this very sword, because Middle-earth can be petty like that. The sword is then reforged and renamed Gurthang, which means Iron of Death. Túrin uses it to kill a literal dragon, which is impressive, and then uses it again to end his own life. That's not even the weirdest part. Before he dies, he asks the sword if it'll take his life without protest, and the sword answers yes. So yeah, it talks. Which is something you don't want from a blade that's already traumatized. Then we've got Ringil, the sword of Fingolfin, the High King of the Noldor. This blade was said to glitter like ice, and was used to duel Morgoth himself, the OG Dark Lord. Fingolfin actually wounded Morgoth 7 times with this thing, which is basically the elf equivalent of going toe-to-toe with a mountain and winning a little bit. Of course, Morgoth eventually crushed him, but Ringil goes down in legend as the blade that pierced Godflesh. Not bad. Let's talk about Aron Ruth. Less violent, more regal. This was the sword of King Thingol, passed down through the royal line of Númenor, eventually ending up in the hands of Elendil. It's got less kill count but more prestige, like the luxury car of Middle-earth blades. Looks good in portraits, probably smells like old libraries and justice. Hadhafang is King Theoden's sword. You remember the scene? Gandalf tells Grima Wormtongue to hand it over, and Wormtongue looks like he just got grounded. It's a sword made for a king, not a puppet, and it looks great while being brandished atop a white horse. Not the flashiest, but incredibly solid. Theoden doesn't do anything fancy with it, but he means it when he swings. Weird name alert, Hadhafang. It's Arwen's sword. Not canon to the books, but Peter Jackson gave it a backstory anyway. Apparently it belonged to Idril, wife of Tuor and mother of Eärendil, meaning it's got deep elven roots. Stylish, elegant, totally impractical for someone who doesn't do a ton of stabbing in the films, but hey, it looks fantastic in a slow-motion charge. Oh, look, it's Guthwine. That's Éomer's sword. The name means battle friend, which is exactly the kind of thing someone who names their car would do. We don't see much lore about it, but if you swing it while yelling death enough times, it gets the job done. And now for the real boss battle sword, Blackthorn, also known as Anglachel, the twin blade to Anglachel. Also forged from meteoric iron by Eol, unlike its sibling, it wasn't given away. It was stolen by Eol's son, Maeglin, who then proceeded to betray Gondolin. So, maybe the sword was cursed, or just had terrible taste in owners. While we're at it, here's a short but spicy one. Aeglos. Technically a spear, but too iconic not to mention. It was wielded by Gil-galad, and the name means icicle, which is adorable until you remember it helped slay Sauron. Cold and sharp, like your ex. Back to swords. Morwen's sword, basically a family heirloom that gets passed down to Túrin, because everything eventually ends up with Túrin, even grief. We also have Dagmor, the blade of Beren, used to cut a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. I feel like that alone should get it a plaque in a museum or something. Any sword that gets close enough to Morgoth's face without being vaporized deserves a little recognition. Then there's Drumborleg, which is technically an axe, but again, we're not here to split hairs. Or orcs? Okay, maybe orcs. Drumborleg was used by Tuor, and its name means thud or sharp, which sounds like a cartoon sound effect, and I love it. It was supposedly able to cleave armor and cause sonic booms. So yeah, your average fantasy battle axe that doubles as a subwoofer. Oh, and then Gel's sword gets like 5 seconds of attention, but we're mentioning it out of respect. No sword left behind. One that definitely deserves attention is the Sword of Elendil, also known as the original Narsil before it was broken. We talked about it earlier when it was reforged into Anduril, but it's worth saying again, this thing was forged during the height of Numenor's might, meaning it probably came with free armor and a built-in superiority complex. Then there's Telchar's work. Telchar was a dwarven smith from Nogrod who basically made half the legendary weapons in the First Age. He's credited with forging Narsil and Angrist, a knife that could cut through iron and was used by Beren to cut a Silmaril. Yes, a knife. Out of all the fancy glowing swords, this little dagger might be one of the most important weapons in the entire mythology. And speaking of Angrist, it snapped after Beren used it. Which is fitting, because after stealing a jewel from Satan's forehead, I'd probably need to retire too. Lastly, let's talk about all the unnamed swords. Which is a paradox, I know, but there are tons of them. Elven blades, Númenórean relics, Rohirric heirlooms that don't get names but definitely get used. In Tolkien's world, even a background sword and a dusty scabbard has a 40-page backstory and at least 2 blood feuds attached to it. And that's beautiful. So whether it's the cursed blade of a tragic hero, the humble dagger of a hobbit, or the royal sword reforged in flame and prophecy, swords in Middle-earth are never just swords. They are legends, destinies, and occasionally plot devices that glow when orcs are nearby. And now you know all of them. Probably... unless Tolkien had one more hidden in a footnote somewhere. That's all for today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next one.